The mahogany table at the Sterling Club gleamed under the chandelier light as Sarah Martinez raised her wine glass, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Here's to moving forward," she announced to the table of executives, "and leaving behind the dead weight that's been holding us back." Her eyes found mine across the polished surface, and I knew exactly who she meant by dead weight. David Thompson chuckled into his bourbon, while Jessica Williams nodded approvingly, cutting into her filet mignon like she was dissecting my career. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "Some people just can't adapt to the new landscape," David added, his voice carrying that particular brand of corporate cruelty wrapped in professional language. "Technology moves fast. Either you evolve or you become obsolete." The word hung in the air like smoke from an expensive cigar. Obsolete, as if my 15 years at TechVantage Solutions, my countless late nights debugging code and solving problems nobody else could touch, meant absolutely nothing. As if the foundation I'd helped build was suddenly worthless because I questioned their latest venture into artificial intelligence consulting. But here's what they didn't know as they celebrated what they thought was my professional funeral. Hidden in my jacket pocket was a folded document that would change everything. A document that made me the new owner of the very company they thought they were saving from my obsolete presence. The irony was so perfect it almost made me smile. Almost. 3 months earlier, I was still Michael Chen, senior systems architect at TechVantage Solutions, arriving at the Renaissance Tower every morning at 7:30 with my black coffee and yesterday's optimism. The 24th floor had been my second home for over a decade, a place where I'd grown from an eager junior developer into someone the entire company relied on when the servers crashed or a client's system needed emergency surgery. My cubicle sat in the corner by the window, overlooking downtown Austin, close enough to Sarah's office that she could call me in whenever disaster struck. And disaster struck often at TechVantage. We specialized in marketing technology solutions for mid-size companies, the kind of unglamorous but essential work that kept businesses running. When a client's customer database corrupted, they called us. When their email marketing platform crashed during a major campaign, we fixed it. When their analytics dashboard showed nothing but error messages, I was usually the one who figured out why. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was solid, reliable, and I was good at it. The problem started when Sarah hired David Thompson as our new vice president of innovation. David came from one of those Silicon Valley startups that burned through venture capital faster than they could generate actual revenue, but he had the kind of smooth confidence that impressed board members. Within his first week, he was talking about pivoting our entire business model toward AI consulting, despite the fact that none of us had extensive experience in artificial intelligence beyond basic machine learning applications. "The future is automated," David announced during his first all-hands meeting, his presentation slides full of buzzwords like disruptive innovation and paradigm shift. "Companies that don't embrace AI will be left behind, and frankly so will their employees." He looked directly at me during that last part, as if he could see through my polite smile to the skepticism underneath. I wasn't against innovation. I'd been advocating for years that we needed to modernize our technology stack and expand our service offerings. But David's approach felt reckless, like he wanted to abandon everything we'd built in pursuit of whatever trend would impress investors. During the Conda session, I raised my hand. "What about our existing clients?" I asked. "We have contracts with companies that depend on our current services. How do we maintain quality for them while completely shifting our focus?" David's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps companies stuck in the past, Michael. We can't let legacy concerns prevent us from seizing new opportunities." Legacy concerns. As if the relationships I'd spent years building with our clients were just obstacles to be overcome. As if the systems I'd architected and maintained were burdens rather than assets. I noticed a few colleagues nodding along with David's response, including Jessica Williams from the marketing team, who had always been quick to align herself with whoever seemed to be rising in the company hierarchy. After the meeting, I tried to have a private conversation with Sarah about my concerns. We'd worked together for 8 years, ever since she was promoted to Director of Operations. I thought she valued my input, my institutional knowledge, my track record of solving problems when things went wrong. "I'm worried we're moving too fast," I told her in her corner office, with its view of the state capitol building. "We don't have the expertise to suddenly become an AI consulting firm. Shouldn't we be building that capability gradually while maintaining our core business?" Sarah leaned back in her leather chair, her expression harder than I'd ever seen it. Michael, I need you to understand something. The board is excited about David's vision. They see massive growth potential in AI consulting. What they don't see is value in maintaining the status quo. But our current services are profitable, I pointed out. We have happy clients, recurring revenue, a solid reputation in the market. Solid isn't enough anymore, she replied. David projects we could triple our revenue within 2 years by focusing on AI implementation for enterprise clients. That's the kind of growth that gets attention from acquisition targets. Acquisition targets. Suddenly it all made sense. Sarah wasn't just looking to grow the company, she was positioning it for sale. And in her mind, legacy systems and experienced employees who understood the current business were liabilities rather than assets. They made the company seem old-fashioned, harder to market to potential buyers who wanted to acquire cutting-edge AI expertise. Over the following weeks, David's
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Influence grew stronger while mine seemed to diminish. He hired 2 new consultants from his previous company, both with impressive AI credentials and even more impressive salaries. He started scheduling client meetings without including me, even for accounts I'd managed for years. When I asked about it, he said he wanted fresh perspectives on our client relationships. The breaking point came during a team meeting about the Henderson manufacturing account. Henderson had been our client for 6 years, and I'd personally designed their entire customer data management system. It was complex but efficient, handling millions of customer records and integrating with their manufacturing processes. David wanted to propose a complete replacement with an AI-driven system that would cost 3 times as much and take 8 months to implement. This is exactly the kind of legacy system that's holding Henderson back, David explained to the room. Manual processes, outdated architecture, limited scalability. We should be positioning ourselves as the company that helps them leap into the future. I couldn't stay quiet. Henderson's system isn't broken, I said. It processes their data efficiently, integrates with their existing workflows, and has been running without major issues for 3 years. Why would we recommend they replace something that works perfectly for their needs? David's expression grew cold. Because works perfectly mom is another way of saying no room for growth. Henderson Manufacturing is expanding into new markets. They need predictive analytics, automated customer segmentation, real-time personalization. They need AI, not whatever legacy solution you cobbled together. The room fell silent. David had just dismissed years of my work as something I'd cobbled together, and he'd done it in front of the entire team. I felt heat rising in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. The system I designed for Henderson is scalable and modular, I replied. If they need predictive analytics, we can add that capability without throwing away their entire infrastructure. Good architecture doesn't become obsolete just because new technologies emerge. That's where you're wrong, David said, and now his voice carried a note of finality. Good architecture evolves or it dies. And frankly, Michael, I'm not seeing much evolution from your corner lately. After the meeting, Jessica Williams approached me with what she probably thought was kindness. Michael, maybe it's time to consider that the industry is changing faster than some of us can keep up. There's no shame in admitting when you've reached your limits. Reached my limits. As if my 15 years of experience, my deep understanding of our clients' needs, my ability to solve complex technical problems, were suddenly worthless because I questioned the wisdom of abandoning everything for the latest trend. I wanted to remind her that 6 months ago, when her marketing automation system crashed during their biggest campaign of the year, she'd begged me to work through the weekend to fix it. But I just nodded and walked back to my desk. That evening I sat in my home office in Cedar Park, looking through job listings and trying to figure out what had gone wrong. My career had been steady, successful by most measures. I'd solved problems, delivered projects on time, built systems that lasted. But somehow that had stopped being enough. In the new economy David was describing, experience was a liability and institutional knowledge was just another way of saying resistance to change. I was updating my resume when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in years. Bob Stevens, the former CEO of TechVantage, who'd retired 5 years earlier. Bob had hired me as a junior developer back in 2009, and he'd been a mentor throughout my early career. We'd stayed in touch sporadically after his retirement, occasional coffee meetings, where he'd ask about the company and I'd update him on our latest projects. Michael, Bob's familiar gravelly voice came through the phone. I heard through the grapevine that things are getting interesting over at TechVantage. Sarah Martinez called me last week asking for a reference on this David Thompson character. I wasn't sure how much to share, but Bob had always been someone I could trust. It's been a challenging transition, I said carefully. David has some ambitious plans for changing our business model. Bob chuckled. Ambitious is one word for it. I did some research on his previous company after Sarah called. Burned through $12 million in funding before they folded. Impressive how someone can fail upward in this industry. He's very convincing, I said. The board seems excited about his AI strategy. The board, Bob repeated, and I could hear the skepticism in his voice. You know, Michael, I still have some connections in this industry. And I still have some skin in the game, if you know what I mean. I didn't know what he meant, but something in his tone suggested I should pay attention. What are you thinking, Bob? I'm thinking that 15 years of institutional knowledge and proven problem-solving ability shouldn't be dismissed so easily. I'm also thinking that companies built on solid foundations tend to outlast companies built on hype and venture capital. We talked for another 20 minutes about the industry, about the challenges of balancing innovation with stability, about the difference between real progress and technological fashion. When we hung up, I felt better than I had in weeks. At least someone understood that experience and reliability still had value. But the situation at work continued to deteriorate. David's influence grew stronger, and my role became increasingly marginalized. He started scheduling important meetings, during times when he knew I had client calls or system maintenance responsibilities. When I raised concerns about proposed changes to existing client systems, my input was dismissed as resistance to change. Jessica Williams began openly questioning my technical recommendations in meetings, despite having no technical background herself. The final straw came during a presentation to the Henderson manufacturing executives. David had insisted on proposing his AI-driven system replacement, despite my warnings that it was premature and unnecessarily complex for their needs. The presentation was a disaster. Henderson's CTO asked detailed technical questions that David couldn't answer. When they inquired about integration with their existing manufacturing systems, David promised capabilities that didn't exist in any available AI platform. After the clients left, David turned to me with fury in his eyes. This is exactly why we need to move away from these legacy relationships, he said. Clients like Henderson are stuck in the past, just like some of our employees. They're holding us back from becoming what we need to be. Henderson asked reasonable questions, I replied. They wanted to understand how your proposed solution would actually work with their existing systems. That's due diligence, not resistance to change. No, Michael, that's fear of innovation. And frankly, I'm tired of having to work around your negative attitude every time we try to move this company forward. That night, Bob Stevens called me again. I heard the Henderson meeting didn't go well, he said. I wondered how he'd heard about it so quickly, but Bob had always maintained an extensive network in the Austin tech community. David's vision and reality don't seem to align very well, I said. That's often the case with visionaries, Bob replied dryly. They see the future so clearly that they forget about the present. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about our conversation last week. Would you be interested in having coffee tomorrow? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. We met at Grind Coffee House, a small shop near my apartment that served excellent espresso and stayed busy with remote workers and freelancers. Bob looked good for his 72 years, his white hair neatly trimmed, and his blue eyes still sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd always dressed simply, preferring khakis and polo shirts to the expensive suits favored by younger executives. How bad has it gotten? He asked after we'd settled into a corner table with our coffee. I told him everything. David's dismissive attitude toward existing clients, the pressure to abandon proven systems in favor of unproven AI solutions, the way my 15 years of experience were being treated as liabilities, rather than assets. Bob listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or raising an eyebrow. You know, he said, when I finished I built TechVantage over 22 years. Started in my garage with 2 employees, and a dream of providing reliable technology solutions to companies that couldn't afford their own IT departments. We grew slowly, deliberately building relationships and reputation along the way. I remember the stories, I said. You used to tell them during the holiday parties. The thing about building something slowly is that you understand every piece of it. You know which parts are essential and which parts are decoration. You know the difference between innovation and fashion. Bob stirred his coffee thoughtfully. Sarah Martinez is a capable operations manager, but she never built anything from scratch. She doesn't understand the difference between growth and progress. I wasn't sure where this conversation was heading, but I could sense there was more to it than Bob's nostalgia for the early days of the company. Michael, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. If you could run TechVantage the way you think it should be run, what would you do? The question caught me off guard. I'd spent so much time defending the status quo that I hadn't really considered what I would do if I had complete control. But as I thought about it, the answer came clearly. I'd focus on what we do best, while gradually expanding our capabilities, I said. I'd maintain our relationships with existing clients, while building new expertise in areas like AI and machine learning. I'd hire people who understand both new technologies and business realities. I'd grow the company sustainably, instead of chasing whatever trend promises the fastest return. Bob smiled. That sounds like a solid plan. Now let me ask you another question. Would you be interested in implementing that plan? What do you mean? Bob reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was simple white with black text, Apex Digital Holdings Strategic Technology Investments. At the bottom was Bob's name and phone number. I've been busy since retirement, he said. Turns out there's a lot of opportunity in the market for someone who understands the difference between valuable companies and flashy startups. I've been acquiring small technology firms that have strong fundamentals but are undervalued by the market. I stared at the business card, trying to understand what he was telling me. You're buying companies. I'm buying companies that remind me of what TechVantage used to be before it got distracted by the latest trends. Companies with solid client relationships, proven systems, experienced employees who understand both technology and business. Bob leaned forward. Companies like TechVantage, actually. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You're thinking about buying TechVantage? I'm thinking about a lot of things, Michael, but mostly I'm thinking about what happens when companies lose sight of their core strengths in pursuit of quick growth. Usually they become acquisition targets for someone who recognizes their actual value. We talked for another hour about Bob's investment activities, his assessment of TechVantage's current situation, and his thoughts about the future of the technology services industry. When we parted ways, he shook my hand firmly. Think about what we discussed, Michael. And keep doing good work, regardless of what anyone else says about it being obsolete. Quality has a way of outlasting fashion. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in months. I felt hopeful about the future. Not because my situation at TechVantage had improved, but because I'd been reminded that there were still people in the industry who valued experience, competence, and integrity over hype and buzzwords. Walking into the office Monday morning felt different after my conversation with Bob Stevens. The familiar hum of keyboards and phone conversations seemed muted, as if I was observing everything from a distance. Amanda Foster, the receptionist, greeted me with her usual cheerful smile. But even that felt strange, now that I knew things might be changing in ways no one expected. David Thompson was already in Sarah's office when I arrived, their heads bent over what looked like financial projections spread across her desk. Through the glass walls, I could see David gesturing enthusiastically, while Sarah nodded and took notes. Whatever they were planning, it clearly didn't involve consulting with anyone who'd been at the company longer than 6 months. I settled at my workstation and opened my email to find 3 urgent messages from existing clients. Henderson Manufacturing was reporting intermittent failures in their customer data sync process. Riverside Retail needed help with their inventory management system after a server migration gone wrong. And Pacific Northwest Logistics was experiencing performance issues with their shipping optimization algorithms that I'd implemented 2 years ago. These were the kinds of problems I'd been solving for over a decade, the unglamorous but essential work that kept businesses running smoothly. Each issue required deep understanding of the client's specific systems, their workflow requirements, and the interconnections between different technology components. It wasn't the kind of flashy innovation that impressed board members, but it was the foundation that everything else was built on. I spent the morning diving into Henderson's sync issues, methodically tracing through log files and database queries to identify where the process was breaking down. It turned out to be a cascading failure, caused by a recent update to their inventory management software that had changed the format of certain data fields. The fix required updating 3 different integration points and testing the entire sync process end to end. While I was debugging the final integration, David appeared at my cubicle with Jessica Williams in tow. Both of them looked pleased about something, which immediately put me on guard. "Michael, we need to talk about resource allocation," David said, pulling up a chair without invitation. "I've been reviewing our current client commitments, and I think we're spending too much time on maintenance work that doesn't generate new revenue." I saved my work and turned to face them. Maintenance work keeps our clients happy and prevents major system failures. That's how we maintain long-term relationships and recurring revenue. Jessica opened a tablet and showed me what looked like a spreadsheet analysis. David's been calculating the opportunity cost of maintenance hours versus new project development. If we reduced maintenance activities by 50% and redirected that time toward AI consulting proposals, we could potentially increase our revenue pipeline by 300%. I stared at the numbers on her screen, trying to understand the logic. Those calculations assume we can land AI consulting contracts at the same rate we currently deliver maintenance services. But we don't have proven expertise in AI implementation, and we don't have a track record that potential clients can evaluate. That's exactly the kind of conservative thinking that's holding us back, David replied. Every successful company has to take calculated risks to achieve breakthrough growth. You can't build the future by maintaining the past. You also can't build the future by abandoning the clients who trust you with their current operations, I said. If Henderson's data sync fails completely because we're too busy chasing AI contracts to fix it properly, how does that help our reputation in the market? David's expression hardened. Henderson Manufacturing represents old economy thinking, Michael. Their entire business model is based on manufacturing physical products using traditional processes. They're not going to be leaders in digital transformation, and frankly neither will we, if we keep prioritizing their needs over forward-looking opportunities. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. David wasn't just talking about shifting our service focus, he was talking about abandoning the clients who had built this company. Companies like Henderson, who had trusted us with critical business systems, and had been loyal customers for years. What about our service level agreements? I asked. We have contractual obligations to maintain system uptime and provide technical support. Jessica consulted her tablet again. We've been analyzing those contracts, and most of them have termination clauses that allow either party to exit with 60 days notice. We could transition maintenance responsibilities to offshore providers and focus our internal resources on higher value activities. Offshore providers. I'd worked with enough outsourced maintenance teams to know how that usually ended. Critical knowledge about client systems would be lost in translation, response times would suffer, complex problems that required deep understanding of business context would be handled by people who had never spoken directly with the clients. Our clients chose us specifically because we provide personalized service and deep expertise, I said. If they wanted offshore maintenance, they could have contracted directly with those providers. They pay premium rates because they value the relationship and the quality of support. They pay premium rates because they haven't been educated about more cost-effective alternatives. David corrected, part of being a strategic partner is helping clients optimize their technology spending, even if that means transitioning some services to more efficient providers. I realized we were having two completely different conversations. David saw client relationships as revenue optimization opportunities. I saw them as partnerships built on trust and mutual benefit. There was no common ground between those perspectives. The conversation ended with David instructing me to prepare detailed documentation for all client systems, ostensibly to improve our knowledge management processes, but clearly to facilitate the transition to offshore providers. I agreed to start the documentation, but privately I began making different plans. That evening, I called each of our major clients to schedule routine check-in meetings over the next 2 weeks. I didn't mention David's plans, but I wanted to hear directly from them about their satisfaction with our services and their concerns about their current technology infrastructure. The conversations were illuminating. Henderson Manufacturing CTO, Maria Rodriguez, was effusive in her praise for the systems we'd built and maintained. Your team has been incredible, Michael. We've had maybe 4 hours of total downtime in 3 years, and whenever we need modifications or enhancements, you guys understand our business well enough to implement exactly what we need. Riverside Retail's IT director James Park had similar feedback. We looked at other providers when our contract came up for renewal last year, but nobody else could match your combination of technical expertise and business understanding. You've probably saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars by preventing major system failures and optimizing our processes. Pacific Northwest Logistics was even more direct. We consider TechVantage an extension of our internal IT team, said their operations manager Susan Chen. The level of service and expertise you provide is worth every penny we pay. We'd be lost without you. These were not clients who wanted to minimize costs by switching to offshore providers. They were businesses that understood the value of reliable, expert technical support and were willing to pay for it. They represented exactly the kind of sustainable, profitable relationships that Bob Stevens had talked about building over decades. But David Thompson saw them as obstacles to rapid growth, and increasingly so did Sarah Martinez. The next morning brought a company-wide email announcing a strategic planning retreat for the following Friday. The email sent by Sarah with David copied outlined an agenda focused on redefining our value proposition and aligning our resources with market opportunities. Translation: they were planning to formalize the shift away from maintenance services toward AI consulting. I wasn't surprised to discover that the retreat was scheduled during Henderson Manufacturing's quarterly business review, a meeting I'd been planning for 6 weeks. When I mentioned the conflict to Sarah, she suggested that Jessica Williams could handle the Henderson meeting, since it's mostly a relationship management activity anyway. The retreat was held at a conference center in the
Hill country outside Austin, far enough from the office to create a sense of importance and isolation. 23 employees gathered in a sterile meeting room with motivational posters and flip chart paper, ready to hear about the company's exciting new direction. David began with a presentation about the explosive growth in the AI consulting market. His slides were full of impressive statistics about enterprise AI adoption rates, market size projections, and case studies of companies that had achieved dramatic results through artificial intelligence implementation. It was a compelling vision of technological transformation and business growth. The global AI market is expected to reach $422 billion by 2027, David announced, clicking to a slide with exponential growth curves. Companies that establish themselves as AI implementation experts today will capture disproportionate value as this market matures. He outlined TechVantage's proposed transformation into an AI-first consulting firm, with specialized practices in machine learning, natural language processing, computer vision, and predictive analytics. The plan called for hiring 12 new consultants with advanced AI credentials, developing proprietary methodologies for AI project implementation, and targeting enterprise clients with multi-million-dollar digital transformation budgets. It was an ambitious vision, and I could see why it excited the board members and younger employees. The potential for rapid growth and industry recognition was obvious. What was less obvious was how we would acquire the expertise to deliver on these promises, or what would happen to our existing clients during the transition. When David opened the floor for questions, I raised my hand. This sounds like an exciting opportunity, but I'm concerned about the implementation timeline. How do we build AI expertise while maintaining service quality for our current clients? David's smile was patient but condescending. That's exactly the kind of either-or thinking that limits growth potential, Michael. Successful companies don't choose between old opportunities and new ones, they find ways to pursue both simultaneously. But we have finite resources, I persisted. If we're hiring 12 new AI consultants and developing new methodologies, where do we find the time and budget to also maintain our current service levels? Jessica Williams jumped in before David could respond. Michael, I think you're focusing too much on current constraints instead of future possibilities. If we can establish ourselves in the AI consulting market, the revenue growth will more than compensate for any short-term transition costs. What about the risk? I asked. We're talking about abandoning proven revenue streams to pursue opportunities in a market where we have no track record and no established expertise. Sarah Martinez finally spoke up from the back of the room. Michael, every business faces inflection points where they have to choose between maintaining the status quo and pursuing transformational growth. The companies that succeed are the ones that have the courage to make bold moves. The word courage hung in the air like an accusation. The implication was clear: supporting the AI transformation was courageous, while questioning it was cowardly. Anyone who expressed concerns about the plan was demonstrating a lack of vision and leadership. The rest of the retreat followed predictably. Employees were divided into working groups to develop implementation plans for different aspects of the AI transformation. I found myself assigned to a group focused on legacy client transition strategies, which was corporate speak for figuring out how to end relationships with our current customers. The other members of my group were enthusiastic about the possibilities. Tom Bradley from the sales team saw opportunities to upsell existing clients on AI enhancements to their current systems. Lisa Wang from project management talked about developing transition timelines that would minimize client disruption while freeing up resources for new initiatives. I tried to contribute constructively, but my heart wasn't in it. These were people I'd worked with for years, planning the systematic dismantling of everything we'd built together. They weren't malicious or greedy, they were simply caught up in the excitement of David's vision and the promise of rapid growth. During the lunch break, I walked outside to get some fresh air and perspective. The conference center was surrounded by rolling hills covered in oak trees, a peaceful landscape that contrasted sharply with the aggressive growth planning happening inside. I was contemplating the irony when my phone rang. "How's the retreat going?" Bob Stevens asked without preamble. I looked around to make sure no one was within earshot. "About like you'd expect, David's presenting his vision for transforming us into an AI consulting powerhouse, and everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid. And what do you think about the vision?" "I think it's a recipe for destroying everything good about this company in pursuit of something we're not qualified to deliver." Bob was quiet for a moment. "Michael, I've been thinking about our conversation last week. How would you feel about accelerating our timeline?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been having preliminary discussions with some potential investors about acquiring TechVantage sooner rather than later, before David's transformation plan damages the core business irreparably." My heart started beating faster. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. The question is whether you'd be interested in being part of the new management structure. I'd need someone who understands the business, knows the clients, and shares my vision for sustainable growth." I thought about Henderson Manufacturing, Riverside Retail, Pacific Northwest Logistics, and all the other clients who trusted us with their critical systems. I thought about the employees who had built their careers at TechVantage and deserved better than being casualties of David's transformation experiment. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'm interested." "Good, we'll need to move carefully and quietly. David's plan might actually work in our favor by making the company more attractive to acquisition. Sarah and the board will be focused on growth projections and market positioning instead of due diligence and operational details." After we hung up, I walked back into the conference center with a new sense of purpose. For the rest of the retreat, I participated enthusiastically in the planning sessions, asking detailed questions about implementation timelines and resource requirements. I volunteered to lead the client transition working group and offered to develop comprehensive documentation for all existing systems and relationships. My colleagues probably thought I'd finally come around to David's vision. In reality, I was gathering intelligence and positioning myself to protect what mattered most when the inevitable change came. The retreat concluded with individual commitment ceremonies where each employee was asked to publicly endorse the AI transformation plan. When my turn came, I stood in front of my colleagues and spoke from the heart. "I've been thinking a lot about what makes companies successful over the long term. I said I believe it comes down to understanding your core strengths and building on them strategically. TechVantage has always succeeded because we combine technical expertise with deep business understanding. As we expand into AI consulting, I'm committed to ensuring we maintain that foundation while we explore new opportunities." It was carefully worded to sound supportive while actually emphasizing the importance of not abandoning our proven strengths. Sarah smiled and nodded approvingly. David looked satisfied that he'd finally brought me into the fold. My colleagues applauded politely. None of them realized I was already planning for a very different future. The following Monday brought the quarterly all-hands meeting, where Sarah would announce the AI transformation plan to the entire company. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the main conference room, with breakfast pastries and coffee provided to create a festive atmosphere. I arrived early and took a seat in the back corner, where I could observe everyone's reactions without drawing attention to myself. Employees filtered in gradually, chatting about weekend activities and speculating about the agenda. The mood was generally positive. Most people assumed the meeting would bring news of new contracts or expanded operations. Sarah began with a review of the company's financial performance over the past quarter. Revenue was up 12% compared to the same period last year, client satisfaction scores remained consistently high, and we'd successfully completed several major system implementations ahead of schedule. By any reasonable measure, TechVantage was thriving. But Sarah framed these results as a launching pad for something much bigger. We've built a solid foundation over the past 15 years, she said, and now it's time to use that foundation to reach the next level of growth and market impact. She introduced David Thompson as our new VP of Innovation and invited him to present his vision for the company's future. David took the stage with the confidence of someone who'd given this presentation many times before, his slides polished and his talking points rehearsed. The AI transformation plan looked even more ambitious when presented to the full company. David projected that TechVantage could achieve 300% revenue growth within 18 months by establishing ourselves as a premier AI consulting firm. He outlined partnerships with leading technology universities, recruitment of top-tier AI talent, and development of proprietary tools and methodologies. Most of the audience was visibly excited by the presentation. The promise of rapid growth, industry recognition, and cutting-edge work was intoxicating. Even employees who had no direct involvement with AI technologies seemed energized by the vision of transforming TechVantage from a regional services company into a national consulting powerhouse. During the Q&A session, questions focused mainly on implementation details and career development opportunities. How quickly would the new AI practice be launched? What training would be provided for existing employees? What kinds of clients would we be targeting? David handled the questions expertly, painting a picture of carefully managed growth that would benefit everyone. Existing employees would have opportunities to develop new skills and work on more challenging projects. Client relationships would be enhanced through the addition of AI capabilities. The company's market position would be strengthened through technological leadership. It all sounded reasonable and exciting, which made my concerns seem petty and backward-looking. When the formal presentation ended and people began clustering in small groups to discuss the implications, I felt increasingly isolated in my skepticism. Amanda Foster, the receptionist, approached me during the networking portion of the meeting. "Isn't this exciting, Michael? I never imagined TechVantage would become an AI company. My nephew is studying machine learning at UT, and he's always talking about how AI is going to change everything." I smiled and nodded. It's definitely an ambitious vision. A lot of moving pieces to coordinate. Tom Bradley from sales joined our conversation, his enthusiasm barely contained. "I've already been thinking about which of our existing clients might be interested in AI pilots. Henderson Manufacturing could probably use predictive maintenance algorithms. Riverside Retail might want customer behavior analysis. The upsell opportunities are incredible. Have you talked to those clients about AI initiatives?" I asked, not specifically, but I know they trust our recommendations. If we position it right, they'll be excited about being early adopters of cutting-edge technology. I thought about my recent conversations with Henderson's CTO and Riverside's IT director. Neither of them had mentioned any interest in AI implementations. They were focused on reliability, efficiency, and gradual improvements to their existing systems. The idea that they would enthusiastically embrace expensive AI pilots seemed optimistic at best. But pointing that out would have made me sound negative and resistant to change, so I kept my concerns to myself. Instead, I congratulated Tom on his forward thinking and excused myself to return to my desk. The afternoon brought a cascade of follow-up emails and meeting invitations related to the AI transformation. Sarah had created a dozen different working groups to address various aspects of the transition: technology evaluation, talent acquisition, client communication, partnership development, competitive analysis, and financial planning. I was assigned to 3 different groups, presumably because of my technical background and institutional knowledge. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same experience that David considered obsolete was now essential for planning the company's transformation. Over the next several days, I attended planning meetings and contributed to strategy documents while maintaining my regular client responsibilities. It was exhausting to work on dismantling the business model that I believed in while also trying to maintain service quality for clients who depended on us. The cognitive dissonance became almost unbearable during a client transition planning meeting led by Jessica Williams. The purpose of the meeting was to develop communication strategies for explaining the AI transformation to existing clients and managing their expectations during the transition period. "We need to position this as an enhancement to our services rather than a replacement," Jessica explained to the group. "Clients should see AI capabilities as added value that makes their existing systems more powerful and efficient." Lisa Wang from Project Management raised a practical concern. "What about clients who don't want AI enhancements? Some of our smaller clients might not have the budget or technical infrastructure to support AI implementations. Jessica consulted her notes. David's analysis suggests that clients who aren't ready for AI transformation probably aren't strategic accounts for our future growth anyway. We should focus our retention efforts on clients with the budget and vision to embrace next-generation technologies. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. Some of our most loyal and profitable clients are smaller companies that value reliability and personal service over cutting-edge technology. Henderson Manufacturing, for example, has been with us for 6 years and consistently pays their invoices on time. Their systems work perfectly for their needs. Why would we risk that relationship by pushing AI solutions they don't want or need? Jessica's expression grew impatient. Michael, you're thinking about individual client relationships instead of portfolio optimization. If we retain Henderson but lose the opportunity to sign 3 new AI consulting contracts because we're spending too much time on legacy maintenance, that's a net loss for the company. But those 3 new contracts are hypothetical. I pointed out Henderson's revenue is real, consistent, and profitable. Why would we sacrifice certain income for uncertain prospects? Because certain income from legacy services has limited growth potential. Jessica replied, AI consulting can scale exponentially. One successful enterprise AI implementation can generate more revenue than 5 years of maintenance contracts. The conversation continued in circles, with Jessica and most of the other participants viewing client relationships as inputs in a growth optimization equation, while I saw them as partnerships built on trust and mutual benefit. There was no bridging that philosophical gap. That evening, Bob Stevens called with an update on his acquisition plans. I've been talking with my investment partners and we're prepared to make a formal offer within the next few weeks. The timing might actually be perfect, with all the excitement about AI transformation. How so? I asked. Sarah's projections for AI revenue growth will make TechVantage look incredibly attractive to potential buyers. But the actual business fundamentals, solid client relationships, recurring revenue, experienced staff are what make it valuable to me. I can buy the growth story at a premium and then focus on the sustainable assets. I told Bob about the client transition planning meetings and the growing pressure to abandon maintenance services in favor of AI consulting. He listened thoughtfully, occasionally asking questions about specific clients or financial projections. Michael, I need you to do something for me, he said when I finished. I need detailed information about client satisfaction, contract terms, and revenue stability. The kind of operational data that won't be highlighted in Sarah's growth presentations. Over the next week, I compiled comprehensive reports on every major client relationship, contract terms, service history, satisfaction metrics, growth potential, and strategic value. It was the kind of analysis I'd wanted to do for years but had never had time for, and the results were revealing. Our existing client base was remarkably stable and profitable. Average client tenure was 4.5 years. Client satisfaction scores consistently exceeded 90%. Revenue retention was 97% annually. Most importantly, many clients had expressed interest in gradually expanding their technology capabilities with our guidance. This wasn't a stagnant legacy business that needed radical transformation. It was a solid foundation that could support strategic growth if managed properly. The problem wasn't our clients or our services, it was leadership that had lost sight of what made the company successful in the first place. I encrypted the client analysis and sent it to Bob through a secure file sharing service. Within hours, he called back with enthusiasm in his voice. Michael, this is exactly what I was hoping to find. TechVantage isn't a struggling company that needs to be saved. It's a successful company that's about to be destroyed by misguided leadership. So what happens next? I asked. Next, we prepare for the most important business lunch of your career. The Sterling Club occupied the top 2 floors of a glass tower on 6th Street, its windows offering panoramic views of downtown Austin and the Colorado River. I'd driven past the building countless times over the years, but never imagined I'd be dining inside its exclusive dining room, much less sitting at a table where my professional future would be decided without my knowledge. Sarah had announced the lunch meeting during our weekly team stand-up, presenting it as a celebration of our recent successes and an opportunity to discuss the AI transformation with some potential strategic partners. The guest list was small but significant: herself, David Thompson, Jessica Williams, and two unnamed executives from what she described as a prominent technology investment firm. I wasn't originally invited to the lunch, which didn't surprise me given my recent exclusion from high-level planning meetings. But 3 days before the event, Amanda Foster approached my desk with an apologetic expression and a printed email in her hand. "Michael, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's been a change to the Sterling Club lunch on Friday. Sarah asked me to invite you to join the group." She handed me the email, which contained all the meeting details but no explanation for why I'd been added at the last minute. I suspected David's influence in the invitation. Including me would allow him to demonstrate how he'd successfully converted a resistant employee to his vision, or possibly to contrast his forward-thinking approach with my supposedly outdated perspective. Either way, it felt like I was being set up for something unpleasant. The night before the lunch, Bob Stevens called with final instructions and encouragement. "Remember, Michael, you don't need to say much during the meeting. Just observe, listen, and let them reveal their intentions. The truth has a way of exposing itself when people get comfortable. What if they ask me direct questions about the AI transformation? I can't pretend to support something I fundamentally disagree with. Answer honestly but diplomatically. You're a technical expert who values sustainable growth over rapid expansion. There's nothing controversial about that position, even if David tries to make it seem outdated." I arrived at the Sterling Club 15 minutes early, partly from nervousness and partly because I wanted to observe the environment before the others arrived. The hostess led me through an elegant lobby decorated with oil paintings of Texas landscapes and into a private dining room with dark wood paneling and leather chairs arranged around a circular table. The room felt like a place where important decisions were made, where deals were struck and futures were determined over expensive wine and carefully prepared meals. It was intimidating but also energizing. I was about to participate in a conversation that would shape the trajectory of everything I'd worked for over the past 15 years. Sarah arrived next, looking polished and confident in a navy suit that suggested serious business. She greeted me warmly, thanking me for making time in my schedule, and expressing appreciation for my recent contributions to the transformation planning process. Her tone was friendly but formal, the kind of professional courtesy that creates distance rather than connection. David appeared moments later with Jessica, both of them engaged in animated conversation about market opportunities and competitive positioning. David wore an expensive charcoal suit that emphasized his Silicon Valley credentials, while Jessica had chosen a sophisticated dress that conveyed both competence and ambition. They looked like executives from a successful consulting firm, which I supposed was exactly the image they wanted to project. The two mystery guests arrived precisely at noon, introduced by Sarah as Robert Stevens and Margaret Chen from Apex Digital Holdings. I nearly choked on my water when Bob walked into the room, his familiar face wearing an expression of polite interest that gave no hint of our previous conversations. Margaret Chen was an elegant woman in her 50s with silver hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the room and its occupants. Bob shook hands with everyone in turn, his grip firm and his demeanor professional. When he reached me, he smiled pleasantly and said, "Michael Chen, is it? I look forward to learning more about your role in the company's technical operations." His performance was flawless. No one in the room would have suspected that we'd spoken dozens of times over the years, much less that we'd been planning this meeting for weeks. Margaret Chen proved equally adept at maintaining professional neutrality, while asking perceptive questions about TechVantage's business model and growth trajectory. Sarah began the lunch with a presentation about TechVantage's evolution from a regional technology services company to an emerging leader in AI consulting. She spoke passionately about our strong client relationships, our reputation for technical excellence, and our commitment to innovation. It was an impressive pitch that highlighted genuine strengths, while positioning the company for the next phase of growth. David followed with a detailed overview of the AI transformation strategy, complete with market analysis, competitive positioning, and financial projections. His presentation was polished and persuasive, filled with compelling statistics about the expanding AI market and case studies of companies that had achieved dramatic growth through strategic technology pivots. The artificial intelligence consulting market represents a unique inflection point, David explained, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who delivered this pitch many times. Companies that establish themselves as AI implementation experts today will capture disproportionate value as enterprise adoption accelerates over the next 5 years. Bob and Margaret listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about implementation timelines, talent acquisition strategies, and client development approaches. Their inquiries were sophisticated and well-informed, the kind of due diligence questions that serious investors would ask when evaluating a potential acquisition target. Margaret was particularly interested in the financial projections underlying David's growth strategy. "Your revenue forecasts are quite aggressive," she observed. "What gives you confidence that TechVantage can achieve 300% growth while simultaneously building AI expertise and maintaining service quality for existing clients?" David leaned forward, his enthusiasm evident. "The key is strategic focus and resource optimization. By transitioning maintenance activities to offshore providers, we can redeploy our senior talent toward higher-value AI consulting projects. Meanwhile, our existing client relationships provide a built-in market for AI enhancement services." "And what has been the response from existing clients to this strategy?" Bob asked, his tone neutral but his eyes focused intently on David's answer. "We're still in the early communication phases," Sarah interjected, "but initial conversations have been very positive. Companies like Henderson Manufacturing and Riverside Retail are excited about the possibility of adding AI capabilities to their existing systems." I felt an uncomfortable twist in my stomach at Sarah's mischaracterization of those client relationships, but I remained silent and continued eating my salmon while listening to the conversation unfold. Margaret turned her attention to me for the first time since the presentations began. "Michael, as the senior technical person on the team, what's your assessment of the challenges involved in this transformation?" The question was direct and unavoidable. Everyone at the table was looking at me, waiting for my response. I could feel David's tension as he anticipated potential resistance from me, while Sarah's expression suggested confidence that I would support the strategy we'd all been working on together. "Any major strategic shift involves significant execution risks," I said carefully. "The AI consulting market is competitive and rapidly evolving. Success will depend on our ability to recruit and retain top-tier talent while building credibility with enterprise clients who have high expectations for technical expertise and project delivery." It was a diplomatic answer that acknowledged the challenges without directly criticizing the strategy. David looked relieved, while Sarah nodded approvingly. But I noticed Bob's slight smile, as if he recognized the careful way I'd framed my concerns. "What about your existing client relationships?" Margaret asked. "How do you see those evolving during the transformation process?" This was where the conversation became more dangerous territory. I knew from my recent client meetings that companies like Henderson Manufacturing were primarily interested in reliability and gradual improvements, not expensive AI implementations. But I also knew that expressing skepticism about client receptivity would undermine the entire transformation narrative. "Our clients trust us to provide strategic guidance about their technology investments," I replied. "The key is understanding their business objectives and recommending solutions that create genuine value rather than pursuing technology for its own sake." Jessica jumped in before I could elaborate. "Michael's being characteristically conservative, but that's actually one of our strengths. Our methodical approach to client relationships will help us implement AI solutions that deliver measurable business results rather than just impressive technical capabilities." Her intervention was smooth and supportive, repositioning my caution as a strategic advantage rather than resistance to change. David nodded approvingly, and the conversation moved on to other aspects of the transformation strategy. But I caught Bob's eye across the table, and his expression suggested he understood exactly what I'd been trying to communicate. The existing clients weren't clamoring for AI transformations, they valued stability and trusted guidance. The disconnect between David's aggressive growth projections and client reality was exactly what Bob had suspected. The conversation continued for another hour, covering topics ranging from competitive analysis to partnership opportunities to long-term market positioning. Bob and Margaret asked intelligent questions and made thoughtful observations, but they revealed little about their own investment criteria or decision-making timeline. As the lunch wound down, Sarah made her closing pitch. We believe TechVantage is positioned to become a premier AI consulting firm while maintaining the client relationships and operational excellence that have made us successful. We're looking for strategic partners who share our vision for transformational growth and can provide the resources to accelerate our timeline. Bob leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You've certainly built an impressive foundation over the past 15 years. Strong client relationships, solid financial performance, experienced technical team. Those are valuable assets in any market environment. Exactly, David agreed enthusiastically. And now we're ready to leverage those assets to capture a much larger share of the growing AI market. Margaret asked a few final questions about client contract terms and revenue stability, topics that seemed mundane compared to the exciting growth projections but were clearly important to her investment analysis. I noticed that her questions focused heavily on the sustainability and predictability of the existing business, while David's answers emphasized the upside potential of the AI transformation. As we prepared to leave, Bob shook hands with each team member again, expressing appreciation for the informative presentation and promising to follow up with next steps. When he reached me, he paused slightly longer than with the others. Michael, it's been particularly valuable to hear your technical perspective on the transformation challenges. I hope we'll have the opportunity to continue this conversation in the future. His words were perfectly appropriate for the context, but I detected an undertone that suggested he was satisfied with how the meeting had unfolded. Margaret Chen echoed his sentiment, thanking everyone for their time and expressing interest in learning more about TechVantage's strategic plans. After Bob and Margaret left, our team remained in the private dining room for a brief debrief. Sarah was clearly energized by the meeting, interpreting the investors' questions and comments as signs of serious interest. David was equally optimistic, already speculating about potential investment amounts and partnership structures. I think they were impressed by our growth strategy, Jessica observed. The questions about financial projections and implementation timelines suggest they're doing serious due diligence. Margaret Chen seemed particularly interested in our existing client relationships, Sarah noted. That's a good sign, since those relationships provide both stability and expansion opportunities. David nodded confidently. They understand that TechVantage represents a unique opportunity to invest in AI transformation while maintaining downside protection through established revenue streams. It's exactly the kind of strategic investment that sophisticated investors look for. I listened to their analysis while finishing my coffee, wondering how differently they might interpret the meeting if they knew Bob Stevens was the former CEO of TechVantage rather than a potential outside investor. The irony was perfect. They were enthusiastically courting the very person who had built the company they were now planning to transform beyond recognition. As we walked back to the office, Sarah pulled me aside for a private conversation. Michael, I was pleased with how you handled yourself in there. Your comments about execution challenges and client relationships showed exactly the kind of thoughtful analysis that investors appreciate. I just tried to be honest about the complexities involved, I replied. That's exactly right. Sophisticated investors don't want unrealistic optimism, they want realistic assessment of opportunities and risks. Your perspective added credibility to our presentation. I thanked Sarah for the feedback while privately marveling at how my carefully worded skepticism had been interpreted as support for the transformation strategy. It was a reminder that people often hear what they want to hear, especially when the stakes are high and the pressure to succeed is intense. Back at the office, I returned to my regular responsibilities while processing everything that had happened during the lunch. The performance had been flawless on all sides. Bob and Margaret had played their roles as potential investors perfectly, while Sarah, David, and Jessica had presented their transformation vision with passion and conviction. But beneath the surface, I could see the fundamental disconnection that would ultimately determine TechVantage's future. David and Sarah were chasing a vision of rapid growth and industry transformation that required abandoning the very strengths that had made the company successful. Meanwhile, Bob understood that those strengths, solid client relationships, technical expertise, operational reliability, were exactly what made TechVantage worth acquiring and preserving. That evening, my phone rang at exactly 9 o'clock. Bob's familiar voice carried a note of satisfaction that hadn't been present during the formal lunch meeting. Well, that was enlightening, he said without preamble. David Thompson is even more disconnected from business reality than I expected. And Sarah Martinez has completely bought into his transformation fantasy. What did you think of their financial projections? I asked, completely unrealistic. They're assuming they can achieve 300% revenue growth in a market they don't understand, using expertise they don't possess, while simultaneously maintaining relationships with clients they're planning to abandon. It's a recipe for destroying everything good about the company. I described my uncomfortable position during the meeting, trying to answer questions honestly without undermining the transformation strategy I was supposed to support. Bob chuckled at my diplomatic maneuvering. You handled it perfectly, Michael. Your answers confirmed everything I suspected about the disconnect between their growth projections and client reality. When Margaret asked about client receptivity to AI implementations, your careful response made it clear that the demand isn't there. We discussed the next steps in Bob's acquisition timeline. The lunch meeting had provided valuable intelligence about TechVantage's strategic direction and leadership mindset, but now he needed to move forward with a formal offer before David's transformation plans caused irreparable damage to the core business. Sarah's going to be surprised when she realizes that her potential strategic partner is actually interested in acquiring the company outright, Bob said. Even more surprised when she discovers that her AI transformation strategy is exactly what's driving the acquisition timeline. Over the next several days, I watched the aftermath of the Sterling Club lunch unfold with growing anticipation. Sarah scheduled multiple follow-up meetings to discuss investor feedback and refine the transformation strategy based on insights from the lunch conversation. David seemed energized by what he interpreted as validation of his vision, pushing even more aggressively for rapid implementation of the AI consulting practice. The momentum building around the transformation made my position increasingly untenable. I was expected to participate enthusiastically in planning sessions while privately believing that the entire strategy was misguided. More challenging, I was sitting on information about Bob's acquisition plans that would fundamentally change everyone's calculations about TechVantage's future. The cognitive dissonance reached a breaking point during a client strategy meeting focused on AI readiness assessment for our major accounts. David had created a framework for evaluating which clients were most likely to embrace AI implementations and invest in next-generation consulting services. Henderson Manufacturing scores relatively low on our AI readiness matrix, Jessica reported, consulting a detailed spreadsheet analysis. Their technology infrastructure is solid but conservative, their decision-making process is deliberate rather than agile, and their budget allocation tends to favor proven solutions over experimental initiatives. Which suggests they're not a strategic account for our AI consulting practice, David concluded. We should focus our relationship management efforts on clients with higher transformation potential. I couldn't let that characterization stand unchallenged. Henderson Manufacturing has been one of our most loyal and profitable clients for 6 years. They pay their invoices promptly, they provide referrals to other companies, and they consistently expand their relationship with us as their business grows. Why would we deprioritize a proven revenue source? David's expression grew impatient, because proven revenue sources with limited growth potential prevent us from capturing exponential opportunities, Michael. If we spend 50% of our senior resources maintaining conservative clients like Henderson, we won't have the capacity to pursue transformational projects that could generate 10 times more revenue. But those transformational projects are still hypothetical, I pointed out. Henderson's revenue is real and predictable. Shouldn't we maintain our foundation while we build new capabilities? That's exactly the kind of incremental thinking that keeps companies trapped in low-growth markets, David replied. Successful transformation requires bold resource allocation decisions, even if they involve short-term risk. The conversation continued in familiar patterns, with David advocating for rapid change and aggressive growth while I emphasized the value of stability and proven relationships. But this time I noticed something different in how our colleagues responded to the debate. Several team members who had previously supported David's transformation vision began asking more practical questions about implementation risks and client retention strategies. Tom Bradley from sales expressed concerns about maintaining revenue during the transition period. Lisa Wang from project management wondered whether we had sufficient technical expertise to deliver on ambitious AI consulting promises. The cracks in consensus weren't dramatic, but they were visible to anyone paying attention. David's vision remained compelling in theory, but the practical challenges of execution were becoming harder to ignore as the transformation timeline accelerated. That afternoon, Amanda Foster approached my desk with an urgent expression and a sealed envelope in her hand. "Michael, this was delivered by courier about an hour ago. The delivery person said it was time-sensitive and requested that you review it as soon as possible. I recognized Bob's careful handwriting on the envelope, though the return address listed Margaret Chen at Apex Digital Holdings. Inside was a single sheet of letterhead with a brief formal message. Following our productive lunch meeting, Apex Digital Holdings would like to schedule a follow-up discussion regarding strategic partnership opportunities with TechVantage Solutions. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange a meeting with senior management. The letter was perfectly crafted to appear like a routine follow-up from potential investors, but I understood its real meaning. Bob was ready to move forward with the acquisition process, and he needed me to help facilitate the next phase of discussions. I called the number listed on the letterhead and reached Margaret Chen's assistant, who scheduled a meeting for the following Thursday morning at Apex Digital Holdings offices in the Barton Creek area. The meeting would include Sarah, David, and myself from TechVantage, along with Bob, Margaret, and their senior investment committee from Apex Digital. When I reported the scheduling request to Sarah, her excitement was immediate and obvious. "This is exactly what we hoped would happen after the lunch meeting," she said. "They're clearly serious about a potential partnership, and they want to move quickly." David was equally enthusiastic, interpreting the follow-up meeting as validation of TechVantage's strategic position and growth potential. "This could be the breakthrough that accelerates our entire transformation timeline," he said. "With the right strategic partner, we could build our AI consulting practice faster than we ever imagined." Neither of them questioned why the investors specifically requested my attendance at the follow-up meeting, despite my relatively junior position in the company hierarchy. They assumed it reflected their recognition of my technical expertise and institutional knowledge, which was partially true but not for the reasons they imagined. As Thursday approached, I felt the weight of carrying so many secrets and competing loyalties. I was about to participate in a meeting where my colleagues would discover that their potential strategic partner was actually planning to acquire their company, fundamentally changing everything they thought they knew about TechVantage's future. The transformation strategy they'd spent months developing would become irrelevant overnight. The AI consulting practice they'd planned to build would be replaced by Bob's vision of sustainable growth and client-focused service delivery. Most importantly, the leadership structure they'd assumed would continue indefinitely was about to be completely reorganized. But I also felt a sense of anticipation and relief. After months of watching David's misguided transformation plans gain momentum, I was finally going to see a different vision for TechVantage's future implemented. A vision that valued the company's core strengths and respected the relationships that had made us successful. The irony was perfect. Sarah and David thought they were courting investors who would fund their ambitious transformation plans, when in reality they were about to meet the person who would preserve everything they were planning to abandon. The Apex Digital Holdings office occupied a sleek building in the Barton Creek Business District, its modern glass facade reflecting the rolling hills that surrounded Austin's western suburbs. As our car pulled into the visitor parking area, I could see Sarah checking her presentation notes one final time while David adjusted his tie and reviewed talking points on his phone. They radiated the confident energy of executives about to close an important deal. Jessica had remained at the office to handle client calls and coordinate follow-up activities, leaving the three of us to represent TechVantage in what everyone assumed would be a crucial partnership negotiation. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. We were driving to a meeting where Sarah and David would discover that their carefully planned transformation strategy was about to become completely irrelevant. The lobby was understated but elegant, with polished concrete floors and contemporary artwork that suggested serious business conducted without unnecessary ostentation. A receptionist directed us to the elevator bank, where we rode silently to the 7th floor, each lost in our own thoughts about the meeting ahead. Margaret Chen greeted us in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Barton Creek Greenbelt. She was impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that conveyed authority without arrogance, her silver hair styled in a way that emphasized competence and experience. Two other executives sat at the conference table, a younger man introduced as James Rodriguez, Apex Digital's Director of Strategic Acquisitions, and an older woman named Patricia Walsh, who served as Chief Financial Officer. Bob Stevens entered the room exactly 5 minutes after our scheduled start time, carrying himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to making important decisions. He wore a navy suit that was expensive but not flashy, and his greeting was warm but professional. Nothing in his demeanor suggested any prior relationship with me or special knowledge of TechVantage's internal dynamics. Thank you for making time in your schedules, Bob began, settling into his chair at the head of the table. After our lunch at the Sterling Club, we've been having extensive discussions about TechVantage and the opportunities we see in your market position. Sarah leaned forward slightly, her expression attentive and eager. We're excited to explore how a strategic partnership could accelerate our transformation timeline and expand our market reach. Bob nodded thoughtfully. Your transformation plans are certainly ambitious. The AI consulting market represents significant growth potential for companies that can execute successfully. But we've been particularly impressed by the foundation you've built over the past 15 years: strong client relationships, consistent profitability, experienced technical team. David's enthusiasm was immediate. Those assets provide the perfect launching pad for our AI practice. Our existing clients trust our recommendations, which gives us a built-in market for AI enhancement services. Meanwhile, our technical expertise provides credibility when we approach new enterprise clients. Patricia Walsh consulted a tablet and looked up with a slight frown. We've been analyzing your financial projections for the AI transformation, and we have some concerns about the assumptions underlying your growth estimates. Specifically, the timeline for achieving 300% revenue growth seems optimistic given the competitive landscape and expertise requirements. Sarah's confidence didn't waver. We understand it's an aggressive timeline, but we believe bold goals require bold action. The AI consulting market is expanding rapidly, and companies that establish themselves early will capture disproportionate value. James Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, his expression skeptical. But establishing credibility in AI consulting requires demonstrated expertise and successful project implementations. How do you plan to compete with established consulting firms that have been building AI capabilities for years? David had clearly anticipated this question. Our competitive advantage lies in our deep understanding of mid-market technology needs combined with our ability to implement practical AI solutions that deliver measurable business value. We're not trying to compete with the big consulting firms for massive enterprise transformations. We're targeting companies that need accessible, effective AI implementations. Margaret Chen made notes, while David spoke, her expression neutral but attentive. And what about your existing client base during this transformation? How do you maintain service quality and relationship strength while building entirely new capabilities? This was the question I'd been dreading, because it highlighted the fundamental contradiction in David's strategy. Sarah answered first, her tone confident but her words carefully chosen. We're planning a phased approach that maintains continuity for existing clients while gradually introducing AI capabilities. Our clients understand that we're committed to their long-term success, and they're excited about the enhanced services we'll be able to provide. Bob's expression remained neutral, but I caught a slight tightening around his eyes that suggested skepticism. Michael, as the senior technical person, how do you see the execution challenges involved in this transition? The question was direct and unavoidable, and I knew that my answer would significantly influence the direction of the conversation. Everyone at the table was watching me, waiting for confirmation that the transformation strategy was technically sound and practically achievable. The primary challenge will be managing resource allocation during the transition period, I said carefully. Maintaining service quality for existing clients requires significant technical expertise and time investment. Simultaneously, building AI consulting capabilities will strain our resources, unless we're very strategic about staffing and project prioritization. David jumped in before I could elaborate. That's exactly why we're exploring strategic partnerships. The right investor could provide resources to accelerate our capability development while maintaining operational excellence. But Bob wasn't finished with me. Michael, based on your recent client interactions, what's your assessment of market demand for AI consulting services among TechVantage's existing client base? The question was perfectly crafted to elicit honest information, while appearing to be routine due diligence. I knew from my conversations with Henderson Manufacturing, Riverside Retail, and other long-term clients that there was little immediate interest in expensive AI implementations. But saying that directly would undermine the entire transformation narrative. Our clients are primarily focused on optimizing their existing systems and gradually expanding their technology capabilities, I replied. They value reliability and proven solutions over cutting-edge implementations. Any AI initiatives would need to demonstrate clear business value and integrate seamlessly with their current operations. Sarah's expression tightened slightly at my diplomatic but cautious response. David looked frustrated, as if I was being unnecessarily conservative in front of potential investors. But Bob nodded thoughtfully, as if my answer confirmed something he'd suspected. That's a mature perspective, Bob said. Sustainable growth often comes from understanding client needs rather than pushing technology solutions. Speaking of which, we'd like to discuss a different kind of partnership opportunity. The change in Bob's tone was subtle but unmistakable. Margaret Chen closed her tablet and folded her hands on the table. James Rodriguez and Patricia Walsh exchanged glances that suggested they were moving into a new phase of the conversation. We've been impressed by TechVantage's operational foundation and market position. Bob continued. Your client relationships are remarkably stable, your financial performance is consistently strong, and your technical capabilities are well regarded in the industry. Those are valuable assets in any market environment. Sarah smiled, interpreting Bob's comments as validation of their transformation strategy. We believe those assets position us perfectly for the next phase of growth. With the right strategic partner, we can leverage our foundation to capture a much larger share of the expanding AI market. Bob leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. Actually, Sarah, we see a different kind of opportunity. Rather than partnership around your transformation plans, Apex Digital Holdings would like to propose a complete acquisition of TechVantage Solutions. The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable. Sarah's smile faded as she processed what Bob had just said. David's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally understanding that everything he thought he knew about this meeting was wrong. I'm sorry, Sarah said slowly, but I think there may be some miscommunication. We're here to discuss strategic partnership opportunities to fund our AI transformation, not to explore selling the company. Margaret Chen spoke for the first time since the introductions. We understand this may come as a surprise, but our analysis suggests that TechVantage's current value proposition is more compelling than your proposed transformation strategy. We're prepared to make a substantial offer based on your existing business fundamentals. David found his voice, though it carried a note of indignation. Our transformation strategy represents exponential growth potential. Why would you want to acquire TechVantage to maintain the status quo when we're positioned to become a leading AI consulting firm? Patricia Walsh opened a folder and pulled out several documents. Because transformation strategies in competitive markets carry significant execution risk, while established businesses with strong fundamentals represent more predictable value creation opportunities. Bob's expression was patient but firm. David, your growth projections assume perfect execution in a market where TechVantage currently has limited expertise. Meanwhile, your existing business generates consistent profits, maintains excellent client relationships, and operates in a stable market segment. From an investment perspective, preserving and optimizing that foundation is more attractive than pursuing speculative transformation. The conversation that followed was tense and revealing. Sarah demanded to know why Apex Digital had misrepresented their intentions during the initial lunch meeting. David argued passionately that the AI transformation represented TechVantage's best opportunity for long-term growth and competitive differentiation. But Bob and his team were well prepared for these objections. They presented detailed financial analysis showing that TechVantage's current business model was significantly more valuable than David's transformation projections suggested. They outlined acquisition terms that would provide substantial returns for existing shareholders while preserving the company's core strengths. Most importantly, they revealed their vision for TechVantage's future under new ownership: gradual expansion of technical capabilities, strategic investments in client relationship development, and sustainable growth that built on proven strengths rather than chasing market trends. Our goal is to help TechVantage become the best version of itself, Bob explained, rather than transforming it into something completely different. As the meeting progressed, I watched Sarah and David grapple with the reality that their carefully planned transformation strategy was being dismissed by serious investors who understood the technology industry. Their confident assumptions about market demand and execution capability were being challenged by people with extensive experience evaluating technology companies. The breaking point came when James Rodriguez asked a direct question about client retention during the AI transformation. Based on your current client contracts and satisfaction metrics, what percentage of existing revenue do you expect to retain while building your AI consulting practice? David's answer was confident but vague. We anticipate minimal client attrition because we're positioning AI capabilities as enhancements to existing services rather than replacements. But Michael just indicated that your clients are primarily focused on reliability and proven solutions, James pointed out. How do you reconcile that with your assumption that they'll embrace expensive AI implementations? The contradiction was impossible to ignore, and David's attempt to explain it only made the disconnect more obvious. Sarah tried to support his position, but her arguments sounded increasingly hollow when confronted with the practical realities of client relationships and market dynamics. Finally, Bob turned to me with a question that changed everything. Michael, you've been relatively quiet during this discussion. What's your honest assessment of TechVantage's strategic options? The moment I'd been anticipating for weeks had arrived. Everyone at the table was looking at me, waiting for an answer that would either support the transformation strategy or validate Apex Digital's acquisition rationale. Sarah and David expected me to defend the plans we'd all been working on together. Bob was giving me the opportunity to speak truthfully about what I believed was best for the company. I think TechVantage's greatest strength has always been our ability to understand client needs and deliver reliable solutions that create genuine business value, I said slowly. Over the past few months, I've had extensive conversations with our major clients about their technology priorities and investment plans. What I've learned is that they value our expertise, our responsiveness, and our commitment to their long-term success. I paused, aware that my next words would fundamentally alter the dynamic in the room. Most of our clients aren't looking for revolutionary AI transformations. They want gradual improvements, enhanced capabilities, and trusted guidance about technology investments. They've stayed with us for years because we understand their businesses and recommend solutions that work. David's face was flushed with anger. Michael, you're completely missing the growth potential in AI consulting. Just because our existing clients aren't asking for AI implementations doesn't mean there isn't enormous demand in the broader market. But chasing that broader market means abandoning the clients and relationships that have made us successful, I replied. And we don't have the expertise or track record to compete effectively with established AI consulting firms. Sarah tried to intervene, but Bob held up a hand to let me continue. I believe TechVantage's best opportunity for sustainable growth is to build on our existing strengths while gradually expanding our capabilities in response to actual client demand. That means maintaining our commitment to service excellence while selectively developing new technologies that enhance our core value proposition. The silence that followed my statement was heavy with implication. I had just articulated exactly the vision that Bob and Apex Digital were proposing, while implicitly rejecting the transformation strategy that Sarah and David had spent months developing. Bob smiled for the first time since the acquisition proposal. Michael, that's exactly the kind of strategic thinking that makes TechVantage an attractive acquisition target. You understand the difference between growth and progress, between innovation and fashion. David's composure finally cracked. This is ridiculous. We're talking about abandoning a transformational growth opportunity to maintain a low-growth service business. That's not strategic thinking, that's fear of change. No, David, Bob replied calmly. It's understanding that sustainable success comes from doing important things extremely well, not from chasing every market trend that promises rapid growth. Margaret Chen leaned forward, her tone professional but decisive. We'd like to move forward with formal acquisition discussions. Our preliminary offer values TechVantage at significantly more than your current market capitalization, with terms that recognize the contribution of key employees to the company's ongoing success. She slid a document across the table to Sarah, who read it with growing amazement. The acquisition offer was indeed substantial, reflecting Apex Digital's assessment of TechVantage's true value based on its existing business fundamentals rather than speculative transformation projections. But there was one more revelation that would complete the transformation of this meeting from partnership negotiation to corporate acquisition. Bob Stevens stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Barton Creek landscape for a moment before turning back to face our table. Sarah, David, there's something else you should know about Apex Digital Holdings and our interest in TechVantage. He paused, his expression serious but not unkind. My name is Robert Stevens, and I was the founding CEO of TechVantage Solutions. I built this company over 22 years, starting in my garage with 2 employees and a vision of providing reliable technology solutions to companies that needed expert guidance. The impact of Bob's revelation was immediate and dramatic. Sarah's face went through a series of emotions: shock, confusion, embarrassment, and finally understanding. David looked as if he'd been physically struck, his confident demeanor replaced by the realization that he'd been advocating for the dismantling of a company in front of the person who had created it. I retired 5 years ago because I wanted to explore other opportunities and I believed TechVantage was in capable hands. Bob continued. But over the past few months, I've watched with growing concern, as leadership has lost sight of what made this company successful. He walked back to the table, his tone becoming more direct. The AI transformation strategy represents everything I hoped TechVantage would avoid: chasing market trends instead of serving client needs, pursuing rapid growth instead of sustainable development, abandoning proven strengths in favor of unproven capabilities. Sarah found her voice, though it was subdued. Bob, we had no idea you were involved with Apex Digital. If we'd known you were considering an acquisition, we would have approached the situation differently. Would you? Bob asked. Because from my perspective, the transformation strategy was developed without considering the long-term interests of clients, employees, or shareholders. It was designed to create short-term excitement for potential investors, rather than sustainable value for all stakeholders. David's anger was now mixed with defensiveness. The technology industry is evolving rapidly. Companies that don't adapt to new market realities get left behind. We were trying to position TechVantage for long-term competitiveness by abandoning the clients who have made us profitable for 15 years. Bob responded, by hiring expensive consultants in markets where we have no track record. By promising capabilities we don't possess to justify valuations we haven't earned. The conversation that followed was both painful and illuminating. Bob methodically dismantled the assumptions underlying David's transformation strategy, using his deep knowledge of TechVantage's history and his broad experience in the technology industry to expose the flaws in their planning. Most devastating was his analysis of the client retention assumptions. Bob had maintained relationships with several TechVantage clients after his retirement, and he knew firsthand that companies like Henderson Manufacturing and Riverside Retail valued stability and proven expertise over cutting-edge innovation. David, you've been planning to transition maintenance responsibilities to offshore providers so you can focus on AI consulting. Bob said, but those maintenance relationships are exactly what differentiates TechVantage from larger consulting firms. When clients trust you with their critical systems, they also trust your recommendations for strategic improvements. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that Bob's acquisition offer represented not just a financial transaction but a rescue mission. He was proposing to save TechVantage from a transformation strategy that would have destroyed its core value proposition while failing to establish sustainable new revenue streams. The formal acquisition discussions that followed were swift and decisive. Bob's offer was generous enough to provide substantial returns for existing shareholders while ensuring continuity for employees and clients. More importantly, his vision for TechVantage's future aligned with the company's proven strengths and market position. Sarah accepted the acquisition proposal with a mixture of relief and resignation. She recognized that Bob's financial offer was more attractive than the uncertain prospects of David's transformation strategy, and she understood that his industry experience made him a more credible steward of TechVantage's future. David was less gracious in defeat. He argued until the end that the AI transformation represented a missed opportunity for exponential growth, but his protests carried little weight when confronted with Bob's detailed analysis of market realities and execution risks. The meeting concluded with handshakes and commitments to begin formal due diligence processes, but the real conclusion had come earlier when Bob revealed his identity and his vision for preserving what made TechVantage successful. As we drove back to the office, the car was silent except for the hum of traffic and the quiet sounds of Sarah and David processing what had just happened. Their carefully planned transformation strategy had been replaced by an acquisition that would preserve the company's existing strengths while providing resources for gradual, sustainable growth. For me, the meeting represented the culmination of months of careful planning and strategic positioning. I had helped Bob understand TechVantage's current situation while maintaining my professional obligations to Sarah and David. Now I would have the opportunity to help guide the company's future in a direction that honored its history while embracing appropriate innovation. The irony was perfect. David's dismissive attitude toward obsolete thinking had led directly to the preservation of everything he wanted to abandon. His aggressive pursuit of transformation had triggered the very intervention that would ensure continuity and stability. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same conference room where Bob had revealed his acquisition plans, but now it was my office as TechVantage's new chief technology officer. The walls were decorated with photos of client implementations and team celebrations, reminders of the relationships and achievements that had made our success possible. Henderson Manufacturing had just signed a 3-year contract extension, including gradual enhancements to their data management systems that incorporated machine learning algorithms, where they made practical sense. Riverside Retail was expanding their relationship with us to include inventory optimization tools that used predictive analytics to improve their supply chain efficiency. These weren't the revolutionary AI transformations that David had envisioned, but they were exactly what our clients needed. Practical improvements that built on proven foundations while incorporating new technologies where they created genuine value. Bob had kept his promise to preserve TechVantage's core strengths while investing in sustainable growth. We'd hired 3 new developers with machine learning expertise, but they worked alongside our existing team rather than replacing them. We'd expanded our service offerings to include data analytics and automation consulting, but these capabilities enhanced our existing client relationships rather than requiring us to abandon them. Most importantly, we'd maintained the culture of client service and technical excellence that had always differentiated TechVantage from larger, more impersonal consulting firms. Our clients continued to trust us with their critical systems because they knew we understood their businesses and cared about their long-term success. David Thompson had left the company shortly after the acquisition, accepting a position with another startup that promised him the opportunity to build an AI consulting practice from scratch. Jessica Williams had initially been skeptical of the changes, but had eventually embraced her expanded role in client relationship management under the new ownership structure. Sarah Martinez had stayed on as Chief Operating Officer, working closely with Bob to implement the gradual growth strategy that balanced innovation with stability. She'd admitted privately that the acquisition had been the best possible outcome for everyone involved, even though it hadn't been what any of us had originally planned. The lesson I'd learned from the entire experience was that true innovation comes from understanding what works and building on it thoughtfully, not from abandoning proven strengths in pursuit of market trends. Companies succeed over the long term by serving their clients exceptionally well, not by chasing whatever promises the fastest growth. As I looked out the window at downtown Austin, I reflected on how different things might have been if David's transformation strategy had been implemented. TechVantage would probably have lost most of its existing clients while struggling to establish credibility in the AI consulting market. The company that Bob had built over 22 years would have been destroyed in pursuit of a vision that sounded exciting but ignored fundamental business realities. Instead, we were stronger than ever, profitable, growing, and positioned for sustainable success in a rapidly changing industry. We'd proven that experience and institutional knowledge weren't obsolete, they were the foundation that made smart innovation possible. The business lunch where I'd been called obsolete had become the moment when that supposed obsolescence revealed itself as exactly what the company needed to thrive. The Austin Tech Summit was held every October at the convention center downtown, drawing hundreds of technology professionals from across Texas for 3 days of presentations, networking events, and industry discussions. This year marked my first appearance as a keynote speaker, invited to discuss sustainable growth strategies in the rapidly evolving technology services sector. Standing backstage in the green curtain area, I could hear the conference moderator introducing my presentation, Digital Transformation Without Losing Your Foundation, Lessons from TechVantage Solutions. The irony wasn't lost on me that 18 months ago, David Thompson would have been the obvious choice to represent our company at an event like this, while I would have been considered too conservative and backward-thinking for such a platform. The audience that greeted me as I walked onto the stage was a mix of startup founders, established business leaders, and technology professionals trying to navigate the competing pressures of innovation and stability. Many of them were facing the same challenges that TechVantage had wrestled with: how to embrace new technologies and market opportunities without abandoning the core strengths that had made them successful. I began my presentation with a question that had shaped my entire career. How many of you have been told that your experience, your institutional knowledge, or your commitment to proven practices makes you obsolete in today's fast-moving technology landscape? Nearly half the hands in the audience went up, and I could see recognition in their faces. These were seasoned professionals who had built successful careers by solving real problems and delivering reliable results, only to find themselves marginalized in an industry that often confused innovation with disruption. 18 months ago, I was sitting in a business lunch where colleagues dismissed my concerns about aggressive transformation plans as obsolete thinking. I continued. They saw my 15 years of client relationships and system maintenance experience as obstacles to rapid growth rather than assets to be leveraged. I told the story of TechVantage's near transformation, carefully anonymizing the details but preserving the essential lessons about the difference between sustainable innovation and reckless change. The audience was engaged and responsive, particularly when I described the moment when Bob Stevens revealed his identity and his vision for preserving what worked while building thoughtfully on proven foundations. The lesson isn't that change is bad or that new technologies should be avoided, I explained. The lesson is that successful transformation builds on existing strengths rather than abandoning them. Companies that thrive over decades understand the difference between growth and progress, between innovation and fashion. During the Q&A session that followed, the questions revealed how widespread these challenges had become across the technology industry. Startup founders asked about balancing investor pressure for rapid scaling with the need to build sustainable business models. Established company leaders wanted to know how to evaluate new technology trends without falling victim to every market fad. One question came from a woman in her 40s who introduced herself as the CTO of a financial services technology firm. We're facing pressure from our board to pivot toward blockchain and cryptocurrency solutions, even though our core business in traditional banking technology is profitable and growing. How do you resist transformation pressure when it's coming from the top? Her situation was remarkably similar to what I'd experienced with David's AI transformation plans, and I could see the frustration in her expression as she described the disconnect between board expectations and operational realities. The key is demonstrating that preservation of core strengths and selective innovation aren't mutually exclusive, I replied. You need to show how building incrementally on proven foundations can achieve sustainable growth while reducing execution risk. Most boards respond well to strategies that balance upside potential with downside protection. After the presentation, I was approached by dozens of conference attendees who wanted to continue the conversation about sustainable transformation strategies. Many of them shared stories of companies that had destroyed themselves pursuing aggressive pivots, or careers that had been damaged by leaders who confused experience with obsolescence. One conversation particularly stood out. A senior systems architect from a Dallas-based consulting firm described how his company had abandoned their profitable government contracting business to chase commercial AI opportunities, only to discover that they lacked the expertise and market relationships to compete effectively in the new space. We lost 80% of our revenue within 6 months, he said, his voice carrying the weariness of someone who had watched preventable failure unfold in real time. The leadership team convinced themselves that government work was old economy thinking, but those contracts had been funding our operations for 12 years. His story reinforced everything I'd learned about the importance of understanding what creates lasting value versus what generates short-term excitement. Companies that survived and thrived over decades did so by recognizing that innovation should enhance their core capabilities rather than replace them entirely. The networking reception that evening was held at a rooftop venue overlooking Lady Bird Lake, with the Austin skyline providing a dramatic backdrop for conversations about technology, business strategy, and career development. I found myself in discussions with entrepreneurs, investors, and industry veterans who were all grappling with similar questions about navigating change while preserving what worked. Bob Stevens appeared at my shoulder during one of these conversations, his familiar presence a reminder of how much had changed since our first coffee meeting at Grind Coffee House. He'd flown in from Dallas specifically to attend my presentation, and his pride in TechVantage's transformation was evident in his expression. "You did well up there," he said, as we walked to a quieter corner of the reception area. "That message about building on foundations rather than abandoning them needs to be heard more often in this industry." We talked about TechVantage's continued growth under the new ownership structure. Our client base had expanded by 30% over the past year, driven largely by referrals from existing customers who appreciated our approach to gradual, thoughtful technology enhancement. The machine learning and data analytics capabilities we'd added were generating genuine value for clients rather than serving as expensive experiments. More importantly, employee satisfaction and retention had improved dramatically since the acquisition. The constant pressure to transform everything had been replaced by a culture that valued expertise, encouraged learning, and supported long-term career development. People felt appreciated for their experience rather than threatened by their institutional knowledge. The interesting thing, Bob observed, is that we're actually growing faster now than we would have under David's transformation plan, but we're doing it sustainably. Our revenue growth is based on expanding relationships with satisfied clients rather than chasing speculative opportunities in unfamiliar markets. As the evening wound down, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. 18 months ago, I'd been a marginalized systems architect whose concerns about aggressive transformation were dismissed as obsolete thinking. Tonight, I was a keynote speaker sharing lessons about sustainable innovation with hundreds of technology professionals. The reversal wasn't just personal vindication, it was validation of the principle that experience and institutional knowledge remain valuable even in rapidly changing industries. The key is knowing how to apply that experience constructively, rather than using it as an excuse to resist all change. Walking back to my hotel through downtown Austin, I passed the Renaissance Tower where TechVantage's offices were located on the 24th floor. The building was mostly dark at this hour, but I could see a few lights still burning, where dedicated employees were working late on client projects or system maintenance tasks. Those lights represented everything that had made TechVantage successful over the years. Commitment to client service, attention to detail, and willingness to do whatever was necessary to solve problems and deliver results. They also represented the foundation that had made our recent growth possible, proving that innovation built on solid fundamentals was more powerful than transformation pursued for its own sake. My phone buzzed with a text message from Maria Rodriguez, Henderson Manufacturing CTO, congratulating me on the presentation and thanking me for the recent implementation of predictive maintenance algorithms in their production systems. The new capabilities had reduced unplanned downtime by 23% while integrating seamlessly with their existing operations. That text message encapsulated everything I'd learned about effective innovation. It solved real problems for people who trusted your expertise, it built incrementally on proven systems, and it created measurable value rather than impressive demonstrations. Most importantly, it strengthened relationships rather than requiring you to abandon them in pursuit of new opportunities. The business lunch where David Thompson had called me obsolete seemed like ancient history now, but its lessons remained fresh and relevant. The experience had taught me that being dismissed as outdated or resistant to change often means you're asking the right questions about sustainability, execution risk, and long-term value creation. It had also shown me that true leadership sometimes means preserving what works, while others are eager to tear everything down and start over. The courage to defend proven principles in the face of transformation pressure is just as important as the vision to embrace beneficial change when it makes strategic sense. As I reached my hotel and prepared for the flight back to Austin the next morning, I felt grateful for the unexpected path that had led me to this point. The skills and experience that David had considered obsolete had proven to be exactly what TechVantage needed to navigate a complex and rapidly changing industry landscape. The story that began with dismissal and marginalization had evolved into one of vindication and leadership, but more importantly, it had become a testament to the enduring value of competence, integrity, and commitment to serving others well. Those qualities never become obsolete, regardless of how dramatically technology and markets evolve. In a world that often confuses disruption with progress and change with improvement, the ability to distinguish between valuable innovation and destructive transformation remains one of the most important skills any professional can develop. That distinction had saved TechVantage from a costly strategic mistake and positioned the company for sustainable long-term success. The business lunch that had started as professional humiliation had become the catalyst for everything that followed. Bob's intervention, the successful acquisition, my expanded role, and ultimately this keynote presentation that allowed me to share these lessons with others facing similar challenges. Sometimes being called obsolete is the first sign that you're asking exactly the right questions about what really matters for lasting success. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.